Have you ever stayed in a relationship longer than you should just because you believed that love, somehow, could fix everything? Even the silence. Even the humiliation. Even the slow unraveling of who you are? This story isn't just about a man and a woman. It's about something deeper. The fight to protect your dignity. The search for self-worth. And the quiet awakening that true value never comes from someone else's permission to feel whole. As we grow older, many of us fall into a familiar trap, the need to prove we're still lovable, still worthy, even if it means giving more than we have to offer. But what if I told you this? Love should never cost you your self-respect. And any relationship that asks for that price is not love, but captivity dressed in emotion. This video takes you into the quiet storm of an older man's emotional journey. A man who spent years convincing himself that holding on was noble until he realized he was holding on to something that was slowly undoing him. And then, one day, something shifted. He let go not because he stopped loving her, but because he finally remembered how to love himself. Why should you watch this? Because the wisdom he earned was bought with pain, and it might just save you from the same. By the end of this video, you'll walk away with something more than a story. You'll learn how to spot when a relationship is draining your light. You'll understand why loneliness isn't always the enemy. And most importantly, you'll feel the quiet power of reclaiming your worth. This isn't just a tale, it's a mirror. For anyone who has ever questioned if they were enough. For anyone trying to rebuild after love has left them fractured. And for those who, at any age, are ready to begin again. So stay with me to the end. Let the voice of experience remind you that age doesn't mean weakness, it means clarity. And sometimes, the most radical act of love is choosing yourself. If you haven't subscribed yet, I invite you to hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell so you never miss a story like this. Your support truly matters. If this video resonates with you, please like and share it. If this topic speaks to you, drop a 1 in the comments. Or type 0 if you'd like me to improve and bring you better videos next time. Now, let's begin. In the beginning, it felt like life had handed him an impossible gift, a second chance wrapped in the warmth of a woman's affection. To him, she wasn't just someone new. She was a sunrise after a decade-long winter. Her compliments felt like sunlight, melting years of self-doubt that had settled on his shoulders like frost. Her voice, soft, deliberate, and eerily precise, like she knew exactly which broken pieces of him needed mending. She called him strong, capable, wise. She told him that age had carved into him a kind of gravity and allure no young man could ever replicate. And he believed her. He began to see himself not as the man life had worn down, but as someone still worthy, still magnetic, still deeply lovable. Every glance she gave him lit a fire in his chest. Her smile carried mischief, a playful spark that made his heart beat like it hadn't in decades. And her gestures, each one executed with such effortless grace, made him feel like the only man alive who mattered. He bent over backward to keep her eyes on him. He wanted to remain the center of her attention, her praise, her warmth. He treated her like royalty, believing he was blessed just to be in her orbit. No expense was too much. No effort too tiring. No gesture too grand. Because to him, she wasn't just a woman. She was youth, vitality, resurrection. She made him feel alive again in ways he thought were lost forever. But as the days passed and days turned to weeks, tiny fractures began to appear in that perfect illusion. At first, they were barely noticeable, those little quirks you brush off as differences in personality or innocent misunderstandings. She began dropping suggestions, veiled in kindness. "Well, you should probably take better care of yourself," she said one morning, voice light, but laced with something sharper beneath. "A man your age shouldn't struggle with things like this." He chuckled, brushing it off. He wanted to believe it was just a joke. But the comments kept coming. Soft stabs, masked as concern. Little barbs that pricked at his pride. Each word landing like a paper cut, small, but strangely slow to heal. Those harmless hints turned into a steady drip of criticism. Her tone shifted, subtly arrogant. A quiet reminder that she was younger, more energetic, more full of life. And he began to feel the weight of her words, not just in the moment, but echoing in his thoughts long after she'd walked away. Then came the reminders, random at first, then increasingly frequent. "You know, you are quite a bit older than me." Each one, a slap dressed as a statement. Every time, a blow to something he hadn't realized was already bruised. He noticed her voice changing, less warmth, more judgment. Less admiration, more appraisal. But still, he clung to hope. Told himself it was just a phase. That love goes through rough patches. That this too shall pass. He didn't want to admit what he was starting to suspect. That the dream he'd fallen into was quietly becoming a trap. The breaking point didn't arrive with a bang. It came quietly. In the most intimate corner of their connection, where trust was supposed to live. She began to criticize his ability to be present with her, not just emotionally, but physically. Her words weren't clumsy or careless. They were deliberate. Sharpened. And aimed precisely at the part of him he had protected the most, his sense of worth as a man. "You're too slow," she said one night. And then, like salt on an open wound, she whispered what felt like a prophecy. "I need more than this." She didn't just compare him to younger men, she used them like weapons. Measuring him against standards he could never compete with. Not because he lacked love or tenderness. But because he couldn't rewind time. It wasn't just his body she wounded, it was his essence. But then, almost cruelly, she'd sprinkle in just enough praise to keep him hooked. She told him that no one had ever loved her with such depth. That his tenderness was rare. His attention unmatched. His devotion something no young man could replicate. Yet even those compliments came laced with mockery. She'd smile at his efforts to please her, then call it desperation. She ridiculed what he offered with sincerity, and disguised it as playful teasing. And he couldn't see it for what it was. All he saw was one more chance to prove himself. One more mountain to climb to win her completely. If you're still watching this video and feel the weight of these lessons, comment one below. Let me know you're still here, still listening. Because this next part, it's the hardest. He endured. Convinced that love required patience. That to love someone deeply meant accepting their storms, too. He told himself. If I can just hold on, she'll see who I truly am. But the storm didn't pass. It grew louder. Crueler. Her words became knives. Each one slicing deeper into the man he used to be. Until eventually, he didn't recognize his own reflection. He started seeing himself the way she described him. As an old man. Outdated. Clinging to relevance. Grasping at youth that was no longer his to hold. He no longer felt like a man with wisdom and experience. He felt like an artifact. Something to be pitted. Mocked. And placed on a shelf. To anyone watching from the outside, his decision to stay might seem baffling, even pathetic. But when love turns toxic, it doesn't shackle you with chains. It uses hope. And that's what held him. Not her youth. Not her beauty. But those fleeting moments, those crumbs of warmth that made him believe things could still get better. He wasn't just trapped by her manipulation. He was imprisoned by his own need to prove that he still mattered. And that is the quiet tragedy of his story. Because many of us have been there. Staying in situations that drain us. Believing our love is strong enough to fix what's already broken. How many times have we shrunk ourselves? Dimmed our light. And sacrificed our dignity. Just for the hope that someone would finally see our worth? His story is a painful mirror. A dark reminder of love's other side. The side that lifts you high. Only to drop you where it hurts most. He wasn't just trying to earn her recognition. He was fighting to reclaim a part of himself he feared was already gone. And in the end, it wasn't the lack of love that defeated him. It was the battle to be loved by someone who never intended to see him. One night, after yet another argument, one that left him hollow and defeated. He retreated to the quiet sanctuary of his room. He sat in silence, the weight of the night pressing against his chest like stone. Every word they had exchanged echoed in his mind, each one cutting deeper than the last. The ache of feeling small, unwanted, and unworthy had become a steady, haunting rhythm in his life. But tonight, something shifted. He couldn't ignore the pain anymore. The hollow kind, the one that hides inside almost happy moments. The kind that grows roots in your soul. And in that stillness, he realized something with breathtaking clarity. He had reached his breaking point. He stood before the mirror, still as stone. Not fixing his hair. Not straightening his collar. Just looking. Looking into the eyes of a man who had lived 7 decades and carried every year of them in the quiet weight behind his gaze. The reflection staring back wasn't broken. It was just tired. Tired of fighting battles that left no scars. Tired of shrinking in silence. Tired of handing out pieces of himself to someone who never saw the full picture. He studied the lines on his face like reading a map etched by time. Every crease was a memory. A lesson. A reminder of a love given freely, and sometimes lost without reason. The silver in his hair, the weathering of his features, they didn't tell a story of defeat. They told the story of survival. Of endurance. Of a man who had lived, learned, and kept moving forward. But tonight, something inside him shifted. Somewhere along the path, he realized he had allowed himself to become smaller, less than what he once was. Not because life demanded it, but because he let someone else's opinions cloud his own sense of worth. And in that stillness, in that private moment of reckoning, a truth rose to the surface. Self-love must come first. Not as arrogance. Not as selfishness. But as survival. He could no longer live as if his value depended on the approval of someone who never truly saw him. He could no longer diminish himself just to fit into a version of the world that had no place for his wisdom, his depth, or his heart. And so, for the first time in many years, he made a decision. A terrifying one. But a necessary one. The next evening, his hands trembled slightly as he sat down across from her. Not out of fear, but because he knew what he was about to say mattered. For his peace. For his future. And when he finally spoke, his voice carried a calm strength that surprised even him. He looked her in the eye, really looked, and told her the truth. Told her how this relationship, once full of hope, had slowly begun to erode his confidence. How he could no longer endure being treated as if he were invisible, or never quite enough. He told her clearly, firmly, that love should never come at the cost of dignity. No matter how deeply he cared. No matter how much he had wished things could change. He could not stay, not if staying meant losing himself. And with that, he chose to walk away. Not in anger. Not to hurt her. But to finally, come back to himself. The conversation that followed was both painful and liberating. She brushed off his words, called them dramatic, maybe even overblown. But this time, he didn't flinch. He stood his ground, not with rage, but with a calmness born from something deeper. The quiet strength of a man who finally remembered his worth. It was a bittersweet moment. A part of him mourned what they once shared. But another part, one long forgotten, silently celebrated. Because after all the noise, the confusion, the shrinking, he had reclaimed something sacred, his self-respect. When he stepped out of the house that evening, he felt a strange mix of emotions wash over him. Of course, there was sadness. Letting go of someone you once loved is never easy. But there was also relief. A heaviness that had weighed on his soul for years suddenly felt lifted. For the first time in a very long time, he could breathe. The air felt lighter. His steps less burdened. And he understood something profound. He wasn't just walking away from a relationship. He was walking toward himself. The days that followed tested him. Loneliness came knocking, uninvited, unrelenting. Nights were the hardest. He missed the presence of another voice in the house. the shared silences, the illusion of companionship. But slowly, day by day, then week by week, something unexpected began to happen. The loneliness started to feel different. Not the aching void of being unloved. Not the emptiness of being overlooked. This loneliness had dignity. It was quiet, but whole. It gave him space to hear his own thoughts again. To feel his own presence. To rediscover the man he had tucked away for so long. He began to reflect on his life, not with regret, but with gratitude. Grateful for what he had endured. Grateful for what he had learned. Grateful that he had made it through. He thought of his younger self, the man with wide eyes and big dreams. And to his surprise, that man was still there. Just buried, beneath years of living for someone else. Little by little, he started piecing himself back together. He reconnected with old friends, people who remembered him before he lost sight of who he was. He dusted off long-forgotten hobbies. Picked up a paintbrush. Tuned a guitar. Got his hands dirty in the garden. He allowed himself to create again. To feel again. One morning, he stood in front of the mirror, just like before. But this time, the man looking back at him wasn't defined by his age or his wrinkles. He was defined by his resilience. Every line on his face told a story. Of victories earned. Of love given. Of dignity reclaimed. Every silver strand was proof of a wisdom no one could take from him. And now, he no longer saw himself through anyone else's eyes. He saw himself clearly. Fully. Truthfully. A man of worth. Of strength. Of boundless possibility. As the months passed, his world slowly began to bloom again. In ways he never expected. He went places he once only dreamed of. He found joy in the smallest of things. A sunrise. A good book. The laughter of an old friend. And he realized something powerful. His worth was never in someone else's hands. It had been within him all along. Waiting to be claimed. He learned that real love, the kind that uplifts, respects, and cherishes, always begins on the inside. The love we give ourselves sets the tone for how the world learns to love us. And as he walked forward into the next chapter of his life, he carried that lesson like a quiet torch. Life is too short to spend it trying to prove your value to someone who refuses to see it. Aging is not a loss. It's a peeling back. A revealing of what truly matters. And in the end, the most important thing he found was peace. Not in someone else's arms, but in the center of his own heart. This emotional journey stands as a powerful reminder, especially for older adults who may be questioning love, companionship, and their own self-worth. The longing to be loved is one of the most deeply human desires we ever carry. It doesn't fade with time. It doesn't disappear as birthdays pass. It lives within us, quiet but persistent, no matter our age. But as we grow older, we must hold tightly to one essential truth. The pursuit of love should never come at the cost of inner peace, self-respect, or the values we've spent a lifetime building. For many in their later years, there is a yearning, almost a hunger, to feel alive again. To rediscover the vibrance and passion of youth. And while that desire is entirely human, it also comes with risk. Especially if it leads us to surrender our dignity. Or entrust our hearts to relationships that dim our light instead of helping it shine. This story you've just witnessed is one such tale. The heartfelt journey of a man whose experience with love became something more. A mirror. A lesson. A reckoning. At first, he believed he had found a second chance at something beautiful. But over time, that relationship revealed itself not as a partnership but as a test. A challenge to his self-worth. His younger partner, though full of charm and energy, could not see the depth of his lived experience. Nor understand the tenderness and vulnerability that often come with age. And in trying to keep up, he stepped further and further away from who he truly was. Like so many others, he was drawn in by the idea of being needed. Of being admired. Of feeling alive again in the way only love seems to promise. But with each compromise, with each ignored instinct, he found himself growing smaller, drifting farther from the man he had spent decades becoming. Leaving the relationship wasn't easy. It required courage. It required clarity. But in choosing to walk away, he reclaimed his identity. He realized that love, true love, cannot survive in a space where one constantly feels the need to prove they're enough. Real love is built on mutual respect. It sees the other fully and cherishes them not for who we want them to be, but for who they already are. By stepping away, he showed himself and everyone watching that there is nothing stronger than choosing yourself. Nothing more sacred than protecting your dignity. And if you've made it this far in the video, and these lessons resonate with you, please type Tobe in the comments. It tells me you're still here, still listening, still feeling. Because this is the turning point. He no longer viewed the relationship as a failure, but as one of life's most important teachers. It taught him to love himself more deeply, to draw boundaries, to protect his peace. He learned that a man's worth is not measured by how well he meets someone else's expectations, or whether he can relive the glory of his youth. His worth lies in his integrity, in his resilience, and in the quiet commitment to living truthfully, even when it means standing alone. To those in the later seasons of life, let this story be a quiet anthem. Every line etched into your face, every silver strand of hair, is a badge of a life lived, of wisdom earned. To trade that away for fleeting approval or the illusion of love is to surrender the richest part of your journey. Those in their later years, perhaps more than anyone, understand. Self-respect is not optional. It is foundational. And the truest love you'll ever receive is the one that begins with you. From this deeply emotional story, 5 powerful lessons emerge, each one a quiet lantern for those in their later years, navigating the complexities of love, connection, and identity. 1. The illusion of youth. The desire to reclaim the energy and romance of youth can be intoxicating, especially when sparked by a relationship with someone younger. But charm and vitality are not replacements for emotional depth, understanding, and mutual respect. Many, like the man in our story, spend time and heart on someone who can't grasp the full richness of who they are. And in doing so, they fall into a dangerous trap, believing they must prove their worth just to feel wanted. 2. The dangerous edge of compromise. Love should never require the abandonment of core values. Yet, the fear of loneliness can quietly convince us to accept what we once vowed we never would. But love isn't a battlefield. It's not a test of endurance. It should be a refuge, a space of safety, empathy, and mutual growth. If we constantly shrink ourselves to be loved, we will eventually disappear. 3. The foundation of self-love. To be loved deeply, we must first embrace ourselves fully. That means owning our strengths, yes, but also the scars, flaws, and quiet tenderness that make us human. Without self-love, we risk handing over the pen and letting others write the story of our worth. But when we stand grounded in self-respect, we teach the world how to treat us. 4. The strength of integrity. A man's value doesn't lie in how well he performs for someone else's expectations, or how closely he mirrors his younger self. True value lies in integrity. In standing tall, even when the world wants you to bend. In holding to who you are, even when it's uncomfortable. That is strength. That is wisdom. 5. The gift of reflection. Even painful relationships are teachers. When we look back not with bitterness, but with clarity, we see who we were and who we become. The man in our story didn't walk away in defeat. He walked away with insight. He reclaimed the parts of himself he had buried for too long and began again. This story reminds us. Real love never demands that we shrink to fit someone else's comfort. He once believed enduring harsh words in the name of love was noble. That staying, even when it hurt, was a badge of loyalty. But in time, he discovered that what he thought was devotion was actually the slow erosion of self-worth. Every insult brushed aside. Every unfair judgment left unspoken. Each one took a piece of him. Until he finally said, "Enough." And that word, spoken with clarity, not anger, was his moment of freedom. It wasn't just a breakup. It was a rebirth. A declaration. I will no longer make myself small so someone else can feel big. The loneliness he feared for so long became his sanctuary. Not a punishment, but a sacred space of healing. And in that stillness, he discovered a profound truth. Inner peace, born of self-respect, is worth far more than the comfort of a crumbling relationship. For the first time in years, he felt it. That quiet certainty. I am enough. In the stillness of solitude, he rebuilt his self-worth. Not in a rush, but one gentle brick at a time. It became a sacred season of reflection and rebirth. A time to explore his own desires, values, and longings, without the weight of anyone else's judgment on his shoulders. He came to understand that being alone wasn't something to fear. It was an invitation to rediscover the parts of himself that had been lost beneath years of trying to meet someone else's expectations. As he embraced his journey, he began to see aging not as a fading, but as a gift. Society often idolizes youth, placing it on a pedestal as the peak of beauty and vitality. But he saw through the illusion. He realized the lines on his face were not flaws. They were badges of resilience. Each wrinkle told a story. Each silver hair, a marker of wisdom earned through fire and time. Growing older, he understood, was nothing to hide. It was something to honor. He saw that those who chase surface-level beauty and appearance often miss the profound depths of a soul shaped by years of living. To twist himself into a version acceptable to shallow standards would have been a betrayal of the rich, complex man he had become. Instead, he chose pride in his experience. He embraced the full arc of his life. The mistakes, the milestones, the quiet victories. And in doing so, he found a new kind of freedom. The freedom of not needing validation from those who could never truly see him. One of the most profound lessons he learned was about the balance between giving and receiving in love. He came to see that intimacy, true intimacy, isn't about performance or perfection. It's a language of love spoken through presence, gentle touch, and deep care. Though he no longer had the energy of his youth, his hands still carried warmth. His gaze still held depth. And his commitment still ran deep. But he also learned this. Love must be mutual. Affection should never feel like a duty. And tenderness must never be met with silence. Real closeness grows only where there is respect, reciprocity, and a shared willingness to truly see one another. He realized that no matter how deeply he loved someone, a relationship cannot thrive on one person's effort alone. Even the most heartfelt gestures need to be received with care, or they begin to lose their meaning. That clarity brought him peace. He understood. True love doesn't mean giving endlessly without return. It means creating a space where both souls feel seen, heard, and valued. Without that, even the most sincere expressions begin to wither. And so, in the end, he knew the moment he walked away wasn't the end of his story. It was the beginning of a new chapter. One where he no longer had to prove his worth, because he had come to know it. Through the pain of letting go, he found a strength he never knew he had. He found peace, not in someone else's acceptance, but in the quiet belief in his own intrinsic value. He realized, life is too short to spend it trying to please people who cannot appreciate your depth. The greatest love story, he discovered, was the one he wrote with himself. And when he looked back, there was no bitterness, no regret, only gratitude. For the lessons, for the scars, and for the chance to rebuild a life rooted in dignity and truth. Life is a journey of learning, growing, and returning home to who we really are. And what we've shared today is just one glimpse into the quiet wisdom that shapes us as we age. But now, it's your turn. Speech balloon, what part of this story resonated with you most? Pushpin, what lesson will you carry into your own life? We'd love to hear from you. Share one insight you're taking with you in the comments below. Your words might just inspire someone else on their path. If you found value in this video, please let us know by liking it, sharing it with someone who might need to hear this, and subscribing to the channel so you won't miss more stories like this one. Thank you for being part of this community. And until next time, take care of yourself and walk your path with pride.